of the feasibility study by the STO for the expansion of the transit services into Western Gatineau, including a link to Ottawa's downtown. Bienvenue à cette séance d'information technique sur l'étude de faisabilité de la Société de transport de l'Outaouais
for the expansion of the transit services into Western Gatineau, including a link to Ottawa's downtown.
My name is Ian Miller, and I will be your moderator for today. Je serai votre modérateur pour aujourd'hui.
I will be your moderator
Councillor
today.
Tim Tierney, Chair of the Transportation Committee, will provide some opening remarks and introduce our guests from STO and city staff. Following the presentation from STO, Chair Tierney will also moderate a question and answer session with members of council and their staff. 15 minutes after the end of the technical briefing, I will moderate a question and answer session for the media. Media wishing to participate can email medias@ottawa.ca, medias@ottawa.ca. Tim Tierney, président du comité de transport, introduira les présentateurs d'aujourd'hui.
Councillor Tim
Après
Tierney,
la présentation de
Chair of the
STO,
Transportation
Président
Committee, will
Tierney
provide some opening
animera
remarks
une
and
période
introduce
de
our
questions
guests.
en
Following the
afin des
presentation of
membres du
STO,
conseil municipal
Chair
et
Tierney will
leurs
also moderate a
employés.
question and answer session with members of
15
council
minutes
and their
suivant le
staff.
span de la
15 minutes
séance
after the end
d'information,
of the
je
technical briefing,
présidera ensuite
I
une
will
autre
moderate
période de
a
questions
question and answer
destinées aux médias.
session with the
Before
media.
I pass things
Media
over to
wishing
Chair
to
Tierney,
participate
I'd
can
like to go over a
email.
few items.
Oh,
Though I think everyone is familiar with Zoom
avec le
meetings now,
président
a
Tierney,
friendly reminder to place your microphone on mute. To view the city official who is speaking on Zoom, put your view on speaker instead of gallery view. The button is located at the top right corner of the Zoom video screen. You can select to view either the English or French version of the presentation by selecting which screen to view if you click on the screen options at the top of your monitor. If you are on a mobile device, you will need to swipe to make that selection. If you continue to have technical issues, you can also watch the presentation on the City of Ottawa YouTube channel. You can also choose to hear the audio for the presentation in either English or French by selecting the language at the bottom of the screen. I will remind those presenting or answering questions that I will be using both your audio and video feeds. Veuillez changer votre écran au mode speaker en anglais pour pouvoir mieux voir les porte-paroles. Le bouton est situé en haut à la droite de la portion
the
vidéo
button
de
for
l'écran.
this speaking
Voir la
for the speaker is
présentation en
located on
anglais
the
ou
top
en
right
français,
corner of the
veuillez
Zoom
changer
video.
l'écran qui
You can
convient
select to view either
parmi
in the
les
English or French
options
version of the
d'écran
presentation by
affichées
selecting
dans
which
la
screen
partie
to view if
supérieure
you
de
click
votre moniteur.
on the screen
Si
option
vous
at the top of your
utilisez
monitor.
un appareil
If
mobile,
you are
veuillez
on a
choisir
mobile
cet
device,
écran et
you'll
glisser
need to
votre
swipe to make
doigt
that
sur votre
selection.
appareil. N'hésitez pas à regarder la présentation
And you
sur
can follow
YouTube
the
si
presentation
les problèmes
on City of
techniques
Ottawa's
persistent.
YouTube channel.
Par ailleurs, vous pouvez écouter la présentation en anglais
You can
ou en
always
français
choose to
en
hear the
choisissant
audio for the presentation in
l'une de
either
ces
English or French
langues
by
en bas
selecting the
de votre
language at the
moniteur.
bottom of the
Je
screen.
rappellerai aux
I will remind
présentateurs
those
et aux
presenting
personnes qui répondront aux
or
questions
answering
que
questions
j'utiliserai vos signaux
that I will be
audio et
using
vidéo.
both
Veuillez
your
noter
audio
que la
and video
présentation est
feeds.
disponible en français sur la page YouTube
Presentation is also
Ville.com.
available in
I will now
French.
pass things over to Councillor Tim
Je vais-
Tierney, Chair of the Transportation Committee, who will begin today's briefing. Chair Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian. And who would have thought that my first role as Transportation Chair would be a technical briefing over Zoom. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour à tous. I want to start off by saying I hope everyone is staying very safe and healthy during these very unprecedented times. On behalf of the City of Ottawa, I want to welcome my council colleagues, and I see there's many of them on there, especially my Eastern Bloc colleagues, hello, and members of Transportation Committee, City of Ottawa staff, our guests from the Ville de Gatineau, and STO, as well as our media friends. Thank you for joining us for this virtual technical briefing. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear about a feasibility study that was undertaken by STO for the expansion of transit service in Western Gatineau, a project that will include a link to Ottawa's downtown. For some time now, STO has been looking for the opportunity to make a presentation to Ottawa officials on this study, but with COVID and other things happening within the city, this has now become the best possible time to do so. This also is an opportunity for Ottawa residents to comment on the study plans in this information that will be posted on the project webpage. STO representatives have engaged with city staff on this transformative project, which could change the way people get around between Ottawa and Gatineau. It also aims to reduce the high number of STO buses and routes currently operating in Ottawa downtown streets. This is a feasibility study that reflects possible new visions for interprovincial transit. However, there are still many steps before this becomes reality, including the support from other levels of government. So this was still several years before shovels get into the ground. Our Gatineau colleagues and their consultants with WSP have joined us this morning to provide councillors and residents an overview of the study and the options that are being considered. This morning's technical briefing will give members of council an opportunity to hear about the study and ask questions. Following the technical briefing, we'll adjourn for 15 minutes and we'll reconvene for media availability in order to give members of the media the opportunity to also ask questions of the study team. Today's presentation will be delivered by Miriam Nadeau, a city councillor in Gatineau, and the chair of the STO board of directors, and by Patrick Leclerc, director of development, marketing, and communications for STO. Also with us today, we have Marc Rousseau, general manager of STO. We have Sandrine Poteau from STO, Ferdinand Villebois from STO, Julie Roy from WSP, Vincent Unger from WSP, and from the City of Ottawa, John Manconi, General Manager of Transportation Services, Vivi Chi, Director of Transportation Planning, Phil Landry, Director of Traffic Services, Pat Scrimser, Director of Transit, Customer Systems and Planning. In a moment, Ms. Nadeau and Mr. Leclerc will begin the presentation from STO. I will ask Miriam to cue our staff for the share of both English and French screens for the presentation when we're ready to begin. For those that are watching, you can also select the languages on your screen as described in the beginning of this presentation. If you're on a mobile device, you'll need to swipe to make those selections. If you continue to have technical issues, you can also watch this presentation on YouTube. You can also choose to hear which language selection you wish by toggling English or French at the bottom of the screen. And now I will hand things over to Ms. Nadeau and Mr. Leclerc for today's presentation.
Thank you. Merci de nous recevoir.
Thank you very much for allowing us to speak to you today. Thank you very much, Mr. Tierney, Chair of the Transportation Committee, for allowing us to make this presentation. C'est une première pour notre ville Gatineau de Gatineau se présenter devant votre conseil pour une présentation comme celle-ci.
A project that is rooted in a need and a vision, a need that we feel in Gatineau, which you also feel. Population growth, road system at full capacity, need to reduce the pressure in the traffic in our downtown. And we share the same vision to address it as a metropolitan region. A reliable, structuring, comfortable, and ecological alternative to automobiles, a support for economic and social development, a project to meet the needs of the next decades. Il y a ici une occasion à saisir, après les constats du passé, de s'arrimer du début à la fin dans la réalisation d'un projet porteur et structurant pour le transport dans nos deux villes pour les 50 prochaines années. The enhanced and unprecedented collaboration between our cities, marked in 2017 by the signature of an agreement to conceive and link our transit networks, is what makes it possible for us to be in front of you today. It is therefore a good omen for this project that we understand each other's needs and that we come together in a vision to meet them. Each day, more than 200,000 crossings are made from both sides of the river. This is evidence enough that we could not imagine conceiving such a project without taking into account each other's requirements. Et nous sommes rendus à ce moment-là dans l'étude, où on doit répondre à la question suivante.
How do we, at this point in the study, we must
Comment
answer the
arrimer
following
les transports en
question:
commun
how
de
to tie
Gatineau
the
et
trips of
d'Ottawa
transit users
à
from
l'aller et
Gatineau
au
and Ottawa
retour
to and
centre-ville
from
d'Ottawa.
downtown Ottawa?
The options that we are presenting to you today respond to the conclusions of the analysis and recommendations made to date. They are also consistent and respectful in the various plans drawn up for the development of your downtown center. In this regard, we are supported by your experts who sit on the technical and steering committees of the current study. Just like those of the National Capital Commission, Public Services and Procurement Canada, city staff of Gatineau and Ottawa, and the Quebec Transportation Department. Obviously, nothing is perfect and everything is complicated. The long list of partners in this study is a testimony to the fact that we are working on the most complex public transit project in Canada, a project unraveling in 2 cities, in 2 provinces, in the federal capital. Des choix devront être faits, mais nous souhaitons les faire ensemble pour le plus grand bénéfice de nos citoyens, de nos villes et de notre région métropolitaine. We are fortunate to create the largest linking and consultation project in the history of our region, and I hope we can continue to move it forward together. Thank you. Et sans plus tarder, commençons. As introduced, we are presenting to you today our complementary study to brief you up on where we are right now and also how we're looking at options to integrate it in Ottawa. Next slide. So you have here the table of contents. I won't get through it all in detail. You'll see it through, but essentially we want to recap where we are now, what's been assessed as scenarios so far, and also how we're looking at the different integration scenarios into Ottawa. Next slide. Next slide. So as mentioned beforehand, this study is rooted in a need that we have for Gatineau's population, which has grown significantly, particularly in our west end, and that growth is expected to continue. As mentioned, there are more than 200,000 interprovincial crossings daily, and 25% of those are made on public transit. So we need for public transit services to increase, and they are also increasing as we speak now. And the reason why we need to focus on offering better options in public transit is because our road system is operating at capacity, and it's been operating at capacity since 2014. So with Ottawa's plan and vision aim at reduces the number of buses in the downtown, we are currently working so that our current road system and public transit services need to be more sufficient and to meet the needs of the growing population by 2051. And we are therefore working on this reliable and efficient public transit system that is required for the west end of our city. As you can see in the next slide. So next slide. This is a map showing where the need is and where the evolution of it is projected by 2031. So to sum them up, we have approximately 6,600 transit users traveling to downtown Gatineau and Ottawa during the morning rush hour. And those numbers are expected to more than double by 2031, with approximately right now 3,500 people heading to the Ottawa downtown. That number is expected to reach 7,000 passengers per hour at peak hours in the morning time of people crossing from Gatineau to Ottawa. Next slide. So the objectives of this study is to find a transit solution that must meet our mobility requirements with current and projected demand to 2051, support our land use and development plan in Gatineau, and also support the region's economic and social development from a metropolitan perspective. Our need for mobility requirements needs to offer reliable and effective public transit service that competes with the use of personal automobiles and ensure efficient service to downtown Gatineau and Ottawa, as they are main trip generators. And we also want to see it connected with the Rapidbus and Ottawa's major public transit access. Next slide. As for the background of this study, this work has been ongoing for quite some time. This study began in 2010 in the form of a feasibility study. It has since then moved to an opportunity study, and we are now looking at the complementary study that's unraveling as we speak now. In 2013, the study parameters were modified, and that's when we moved to an opportunity study to really ask our findings into how we can better answer the need that we have for public transit. And the conclusion of the study that we had in 2017 came to two major conclusions. First, that we would need 2 axes on the Gatineau side to respond to the demand, and also that buses show auto-congestion scenarios in their mid-term period of time. So that's why we needed to dig more into a rail option and also be complementary to that metropolitan vision that we have, also given the fact that Ottawa's already moved to rail. So that's how we entered the process of moving to a complementary study in 2018. Moving to the next slide. So the complementary study stages, there are 4 big phases to this study. We are right now in the evaluation of the different options, and that's where we come in, going into more details of options and looking at how we can integrate the transportation system, the structuring link into the Ottawa downtown. Next slide. This is a big picture of the big phases that we have. Overall, there are 4 stages to the study that's unraveling right now, but furthermore, this is one part of a bigger process all the way to approval at Treasury Board for construction. So the current complementary study is part of that broader process. You can see here with the green area of the slide there, where we're in the opportunity study was done, and the complementary study is part of that. And we've also moved to certain analyses that have been anticipated to find a choice of scenario by the end of 2020, by the end of this year. So at this stage, I would let Mr. Leclerc from the STO team take on the presentation. Yes.
Thank you very much, Madame Nadeau. So one of the most important elements of this study and what makes it so particular is, as mentioned, as Madame Nadeau mentioned before, is the connection of the 2 downtowns. So it's very important as we survey people and as we concluded the first study that we have that strong link between the two cities and the 2 systems. So what we did that is particular with that study is, instead, although we're providing service to the west end of Gatineau, instead of initiating the study there, we started from downtown Ottawa to see what were the optimal connections. And from that point, we looked at all the ways to cross the river and to provide that connection. So go to the next slide, please. So when we actually looked at all the bridges to connect our 2 systems. So I will start with the first bridge you see on your left-hand side, the Champlain Bridge, when we're coming from the west end of the city in the Elmer sector as the first bridge we cross. We currently use that bridge to connect our passengers to Tonne's Pasture right now. So when we look at the high-capacity transit system, the Champlain Bridge, one of the challenges is that it's too far west, so it doesn't allow us to connect to the downtown Gatineau and then connect smoothly to downtown Ottawa. For the similar reason, when you look at McDonald-Cartier Bridge, the one on your right-hand side, it's too far east. So for people coming from the west end, having to go through that vehicle loop would not be efficient. So therefore, that bridge was not considered for the high-capacity transit system we're considering. Now, again, from the coming from the west, the next bridge after Champlain Bridge that we cross is the Prince of Wales Bridge. That bridge has been in the public space for many years now. When we look at it, there's a natural connection between the Rapid Bus and Bayview. There are a few challenges with that bridge. One is capacity issue, and the other one is how we connect to Gatineau, how we connect the two downtown. So on the capacity issue, the number of passengers we bring, we would basically eat up all capacity at Bayview when there's not enough residual capacity in the system to have all passengers connect there. So that's one element. The other element, as I just mentioned, is that if we were to get people to use the Prince of Wales, then they would not reach their destination if they go to downtown Gatineau. And the other element is during the day for the crossings between the two downtowns for federal employees, for instance, then they would need to make that big loop going through Bayview, Prince of Wales, coming back to the downtown Gatineau if they were to start from downtown Ottawa. So that bridge, however, has a potential for a secondary connection. It's a good link for future west-south route, but not for a high-capacity, high-frequency system. Then if we move on to the next bridge going eastbound is Chaudière Bridge. That bridge, the main challenge is that it's very narrow, and there's the built environment there with heritage buildings, the ZB development, and it's a bridge that's been identified mostly for active transportation type of complete street, but not so much for high capacity, high frequency system. So that leaves us with two bridges. We'll go to the next slide, please. With Portage and Alexandra, so we'll continue with the Portage Bridge. There's a very natural connection there between the two downtowns. It's a central bridge. It has sufficient capacity, and it's and even for connection, not only the morning and the afternoon commute, but during the day. So it presents a very good option. When we look at the Alexandra Bridge, it has potential for a future interprovincial loop in the future vision, future development. However, in the case of that study, to provide service for people coming from the west end of Gatineau, they would connect very well to Gatineau downtown. However, to reach their destination, which is mainly where federal offices are in downtown Ottawa, they would need to make that loop. That would make it that would take more time to complete their commute. Would not be very efficient, not optimal. The other thing is that if we were to connect through a tunnel to the radio station, it's highly complex in that sector. So Alexandra Bridge was not considered for the high capacity, high frequency connection in the context of that study. It remains a good connection as well to consider active transportation and other modes moving forward. Therefore, the recommended bridge is the Portage Bridge to continue, and that's what you will see for the rest of the city. So we'll go to the next slide, please. That is, we won't spend much time on it, just to mention that when we were looking at the at various ways to cross the river, we also looked at alternative ways, be it a new tunnel, new bridges. However, there was not strong potential there, and the main one really is the Portage Bridge, and it serves the needs, it meets the demand. So that's why other options were not considered any further. Next slide, please. We'll get into the scenarios that were assessed. We started from a long list of scenarios, and again, as mentioned, Madame Nadeau was always in close collaboration with the City of Ottawa, OC Transpo, and all our partners and, from the federal government and other partners as well. So we'll look at, if we can go to the next slide, please, at the 5 scenarios in a minute. Just a word on the modes that are included when we talk about high capacity, high frequency service. We're considering a BRT. BRT, the vehicles you see there, the buses, is simply to illustrate that we've been looking at every type of vehicle moving forward. It will be electric vehicle, and in Quebec, that's the direction we're taking. So be it tram or buses, it's going to be electric vehicle. But in terms of capacity, we looked at the regular 40-foot bus, the articulated buses, the current one that we have, and the bi-articulated buses. Although we don't have in those buses in Canada, we also looked in terms of capacity and feasibility. When we talk about the rail connection, the rail system, we're talking about an urban tram, so it's different from the system that you have in Ottawa that has higher capacity. The tram is a good fit for urban integration. It generally across intersections at grade, and it can also operate in mixed use or dedicated lanes. So these that technology is used in Waterloo as well as in downtown Toronto, just as an example. So next slide, please. The first one is the baseline scenario. The methodology that we use for these studies is always we start with the baseline scenario. What it is basically is we look at the current situation and we improve it with all sorts of transit priority measures, be it dedicated lane or priority at crossings. And then we see if it can meet the demand. Obviously, if the baseline, the current scenario improve with priority measures or to meet the demand, that's what we would go for. In our case, it doesn't meet the demand, however, it's there. And then we compare all scenarios that are high frequency, high capacity against the baseline scenario. So that's the first one we start with. We'll move to the second one. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have one scenario that is all buses. You see there are two branches. The one on the kind of at the northern that you see is the Quartier du Plateau. So there's one branch there, and there's one corridor south as well. So the one you see with the green line would be a scenario where it's all buses. The one you see with the blue line is the same scenario, but using only trams. We'll go to the next slide, please. And then we have two scenarios that we call the hybrid scenarios. Basically combining, you have a BRT in one corridor. The one on the left is the BRT south, and then the tram going up north, and then they meet when they get to the to downtown Gatineau. And the other one at the bottom, then it's just the other way around. You have the BRT north and the tram on the using the south corridor. Next slide, please. We held in June of 2019. We can go to the next slide, please. A public consultations in Gatineau on these 5 scenarios. That was the first time we consulted our citizens there on that particular one. Just a few highlights in terms of the need. Was clear for a large majority of respondents that we need to have that high capacity, high frequency network to respond to the needs on the west end of Gatineau. About 2/3 of respondents prefer the tram option. So one of the scenarios, including a tram, they consider it faster, more reliable, but also, and I think it's important to mention, it's the most viable scenario over the long term. So people want to go straight to what will allow us to respond to the demand over the next 30, 50 years. And then about the connection in Ottawa, majority of respondents consider the system should extend beyond Lion Station to get closer to their point of interest. So we can go to the next slide, please. The rationale for a tram component, we know we're not in Gatineau, it's not a big city per se with millions of people. So why do we need a tram? That slide illustrates it. When we're looking the current number of passengers that are crossing on the Portage Bridge during the peak hours per hour is 3,500 people, and it's expected to double basically over the next 15 years. So to meet that demand in terms of number of buses we would need, as you have the numbers there, if we use regular buses, the 40-foot, it's 170 per hour, or if it's articulated buses, 105. Bi-articulated buses, 75 per hour, or in the case of the tram, it's 25 trams per hour to meet the demand in terms of capacity. Now, the picture you see there is from last winter. We already faced that challenge of the congestion on Portage Bridge. You see it in your downtown core as well. As Chair Tierney mentioned, rightfully so, we have that common goal of reducing the number of buses crossing the river, getting into downtown Ottawa. Now, with the only all bus scenario, basically we would not achieve that aim, and we could not even operate the system. Now, the maximum capacity of the dedicated lane is about 80 bus per hour. That is to keep it fluid, have a good quality of service, have a good on-time performance, and with the numbers you see there, we wouldn't be able to achieve it. Therefore, only the scenarios that have at least one tram component are moving forward, because that scenario with all buses is not viable. So next slide, please. So that leaves us with the all-tram, as I mentioned. Can go to the next slide, please. And the two hybrid scenarios. Now it takes us to, we have these three scenarios. We can go to the next slide, please. In terms of the integration into Ottawa, that's a major component, obviously, of that system. So a few highlights. We'll get into the tram component in a minute, but just a word on buses crossing Portage and McDonald-Cartier with a combined, there's a combined loop there that we're considering. Just to mention that even with the tram system, similar to what you have in Ottawa with the LRT, you still need to have a certain amount of buses. That is for secondary service. It's the residual buses that will offer a good quality of service to your customers and maintain good ridership. So you drastically reduce the number of buses that would cross. You still need to have that as part of your overall plan. We can go to the next slide, please. So the main design consideration in terms of the system requirements, when we talk about the tram, we're looking for the straightest route possible. We want to have an efficient connection with the train station, attractive systems for riders, obviously reliable and close to their places of interest, and double track. We mean that we want to have a system that will go both ways, can go both ways simultaneously. We don't want to have a tram that would have to wait, for instance, on the Portage Bridge for another tram to provide service and then come back and then go. That would not be really efficient and optimal. In terms of the City of Ottawa's plans for downtown streets, this is where the engagement with the city staff was absolutely key in that study. So we look at your plans in terms of the various streets. So Queen Street would be redesigned as a complete street. Sparks Street, there are revival plans with events taking place there. Albert and Slater will be repurposed to include more active transportation, and there are various cycling projects that are being planned that we're taking into consideration. So we can go to the next slide, please. So just to recap, basically on the various streets where we can integrate the system, we basically looked at everything with the city staff and we were guided by them on that. And we went similar to what we did for the bridges through the elimination and looking for the most optimal connection so that we see the current situation and what is envisioned for Queen, Albert, and Slater, and Sparks. So we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So that is for the tram. We covered the buses previously. For the trams, we basically have two options. One at grade, one underground. The option at grade would, after we cross Portage Bridge, would remain on the north side of Wellington and then continue up to about Elgin. That's in more detail that is being studied. And the other option is below grade in the tunnel, so under Sparks. What you see there is that after the Portage Bridge, you would cross the Garden of Provinces and Territories through a structure west of Commissioner Street, and then get on the ground under Sparks for a tunnel option. That's what's being assessed as well right now. Next slide, please. So an overview of the pros and cons of the two options that are being considered. The at grade on Wellington, the pros, makes it really easy to access for the riders. It's easier to build, and there's a potential component of an interprovincial loop with the Alexandra Bridge in a very long-term vision, as I mentioned earlier. In terms of the cons or the challenges we would face, using that corridor means making several compromises from all the parties. So we're thinking of the North Esplanade, the bike facility that is planned there, vehicular traffic lanes as well. So many compromises need to be made. There are security challenges as well to work around in terms of the parliamentary complex and at the station. Possible disruptions to demonstrations and events on Wellington Street. We know it happens. Disruption to current traffic and transit service during the construction. And the option would lead to more pedestrian crossing Wellington to reach the station or their destination south of Wellington. In terms of the tunnel option on the Sparks, the pros, very minimal impact on the traffic and surface amenities. It allows for a more direct connection with the O train, although it's not the same tunnel, but you could link the station there on the ground. It's weather protected environment for transferring passengers, so that quality of service there, and it's less vulnerable to service interruptions from external events, as we mentioned, the demonstration and events taking place around Parliament Hill. The cons, it's a much higher cost than a surface option. It's more complex and lengthier construction process with higher risk. There are significant underground constraints on the Sparks. The portal would have an impact on the open space west of Commissioner Street, as I mentioned, and going through the Garden of Provinces and Territories. And there are possible security concerns as well, being adjacent to federal institutions. So with that, we can move to the next slide, and I will hand it over back to our chair, Madame Nadeau.
Yes. So yes, you can move right ahead to the next slide. So right now, and that is the announcement that we made on January 30th when we went public with the fact that we, based on the progress of the study, we were putting aside scenarios that included all buses, putting it forward that we would work on a project that ultimately would have a tram component. And going on with that announcement, we also announced that we were going through further analysis of the options for the integration in Ottawa. So that ongoing analysis of options includes the following key issues that need to be addressed for those two options. So the vehicular traffic impact in the downtown, the number of stations that are required and the locations, boarding and disembarking issues at the platforms, quality of connections with the old train, security issues, trade-offs and mitigation plan. Mr. Leclerc brought some elements of that. Order of magnitude of costs. Obviously, that is something that is to take into consideration. And also the public consultation that we want to have part of this process. Next slide. So upcoming events in Ottawa. So linked to that public consultation component for the two options. So we're looking at online public consultation in June of this year for Ottawa and Gatineau to present the evaluation in the progress and also seek public feedback on those options. And then we're set to come back to Transportation Committee and Council in July of this year to present the recommended plan for the integration in Ottawa. So that would conclude the presentation that we have on the technical briefing for the integration scenarios that we have and the study of date. Thank you.
Great, and thank you very much, Ms. Nadeau and Mr. Leclerc. I'll now open the floor to questions from councillors. And in the interest of time, we're going to limit the questions to 2 questions per councillor. And as we've been doing this, we're kind of getting used to this now. We'll go in order by ward. I do see there's quite a bit of participation from our council colleagues, which is good news. So if you can please keep your questions to the point, and also to our representatives from STO and the project team, if you can also respond as quick as possible, just so we can get through everybody, because there's quite a few people. So at this point, I'm going to go to I see Councillor Luloff. Do you have a question?
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Dudas. Great. If you could just push down your space bar and ask your two questions. Thank you.
Merci pour la présentation.
Thank you for your presentation.
Très important pour
It's very important that we integrate our two transit
thank you so
systems.
much. That was a wonderful presentation. Very wonderful information. I do have only two questions, and I'm just curious about the timing. In addition to coming back with information, what is your timing for the ultimate plan for Gatineau and the integration of Ottawa? And I'm curious about the funding. So I don't know that you touched on the funding, but what does that look like? Is it a partnership, or what, or is there integration with the federal and provincial governments as well?
Yes, so I can respond to those two questions. So in terms of timing, this study is being funded by the Federal Infrastructure Fund. So the phase one, the number one envelope that they set out. So there's a timeline for this study to be completed by the end of 2020 for that funding. So, and we've already gotten an extension. It was supposed to be done by end of last year. And we already got an extension to give us more time, given this is a complex project. It's never been done before, this level of consultation, to have such an integrated project. And, you know, as I mentioned, 2 cities, 2 provinces, the federal's capital, etc. So that sort of explains the timeline on which we are. We know it's aggressive, but it's dictated by funding that we have right now for it. As for the unraveling of the project, once that study is completed, it's an 8 to 10 year horizon for it to be completed and actually have ridership embark on this tram. And funding has been the provincial government has committed to 60% of the funding, as it has with other rail projects in Quebec, and we're working with our federal counterparts to have 100% of this project being funded by other levels of government.
Great. Any further questions, Councillor Dudas? No, you're good. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for keeping it brief. Is Councillor Harder on the call? I don't see her here. Councillor Suds, I do not see her here either. Councillor El-Shantiri, Councillor Gower. Great, Councillor Gower, please go ahead.
I don't have questions, but I'd also like to thank you for your presentation. I'm very heartened to see the progress that we're making in integrating our 2 public transit networks on both sides of the river. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for those comments. I'm looking to see if Councillor Kavanagh is
I'm here.
Oh, great. Feel free, if you have 2 questions, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. The concern that I have is in terms of how much have you taken into consideration traffic going west? We have the new D&D site in Bay Ward, and I see a lot of traffic on that. And it would be great to have the transit thinking in terms of the connections there, not to mention my neighbors to Canada, to the high-tech industry. A lot of the traffic I see on the Parkway is coming from Quebec, and it would be great if they had alternatives. And I want to know how much thought has been given into that, because it seems that most of it is concerned about going downtown, which is not where most people work.
Yes, thank you for your question. I'll just let my technical expert respond to that.
Yes, it's a good question, and just to mention, that's why we're looking at various points of connection. When I talk about the secondary connection as well, we know that in terms of the riders, about 80% of our riders they end there in downtown Ottawa. When they cross the river, about 20% will make a connection. However, we know that there are plans to extend the LRT out west as well in Ottawa. And that's why the connection there is key. And we will keep using the Champlain Bridge as well to connect to Tonnes Pasture to facilitate these movements.
And if I can just add on to that, since the O train has been put in operation, the STO has increased the number of buses it sends to Témiscouata by the Champlain Bridge. So we are investing, to increase our offer of service and improve, how we answer for the needs. And so we're sensitive to those requests and want to make sure whenever we put more money on the table to increase our offer to our riders that we take on all of those opportunities.
I appreciate that. I think it would be good to do a study because we certainly see the traffic coming into Bayward from Quebec, and it's normal. They're coming to work, but I think they need alternatives. So I think that should be looked at very specifically because it is a very, very large operation at D&D. Going to have over 10,000 employees there. A good number of them are from Quebec. They used to work in the East End. Now they're working in the West End. So I think that needs to be looked at. My other question is in terms of the Prince of Wales Bridge. I'm very disappointed that it will not be considered soon for as a rail connection. But what is the timeline for other uses?
Well, the Prince of Wales Bridge was something that we were looking at seriously. I mean, it was part of the preliminary project that was set out by our mayor back in June of 2018. The fact of the matter is that looking at the data with the experts, it was just not the viable option to make sure that in the case of this project and the need that we need to answer for our West riders and also people, aiming to get to Gatineau downtown and also Ottawa downtown was just not the option that was the most suitable for this particular project. The bridge is owned by Ottawa, and our mayor is also a fan of, moving along with also the project of Mr. Watson to make it an active link. So that's something more definitely will be a partner in whatever project is set forward for that bridge. And looking at it on public transit with the buses, I mean, it is also a natural link with the Rapibus once, if that project moves to rail at some point in time to make a connection there. So it's definitely something that we want to keep in our books in terms of future options. But in terms of this project in particular, it's just not the most suitable bridge to answer for the need, although we did consider it very seriously.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I hope I'm aware that it was owned by the City of Ottawa. I just wanted to know about the connectivity possible. Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. I don't see Councillor Shirelli. I'm looking to see is Councillor Egley on this call. I don't see his face popping up. Councillor Deans, I don't believe is on this call. I'm at myself. I'll quickly. I have a quick question related to the branding of the trains. I didn't hear anything really around that. I think it would be a bit of a challenge having STO driving in front of in the City of Ottawa. Is there an opportunity to co-brand it, make it like a Twin City kind of branding?
Absolutely, we are extremely open to a signature branding for this project, knowing that it is something that's coming to the heart of the federal capital. And, as I said firsthand, this is a project that is rooted in a common vision. So obviously for it to have a signature branding is something we're up to.
Great, thank you for that. Conseiller Fleury.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking forward to seeing the official report and to hearing it in July at the Transit Committee. I'll be able to ask more technical questions at that point. I don't really have any questions because we were briefed last week, and I'd like to thank Miriam and the STO team for having done that. But I'd like to take the opportunity to put forward a couple of ideas and and ask several questions as well. First of all, I recognize that the current O train is problematic, but what we're looking for is an integration of our bus system with the LRT. Now there are, of course, issues with the stability of the network. We realize that, but in your slides you talked about options. Now there was an agreement that was actually signed in 2007. I just wanted to point that out today. Now, given that you're proposing the use of city land, Ottawa city land, I think it would be important and it would be the right time to perhaps to set up a governance table. I know that STO and OC Transpo are working together closely. I recognize that our two mayors meet on a regular basis also, but as you know, this isn't a dictatorship, it's a democracy. We all have a voice at the table. So I was wondering whether a governance table bringing together the three levels of government on both banks of the river couldn't be created to make sure that all considerations be taken into account in this project. I'm not asking for an answer today, but on our side, I'd just like to tell you that there's a real need for us to talk about this issue, including public transit. There are others, of course. I'd also like to make a final point now. I'd like to pick up on what Teresa Kavanagh said. In her question, the downtown areas on both sides of the river are important, but the federal government, the RCMP, National Defence, and other agencies have started to decentralize out of the downtown core. And as you mentioned, there have been lots of change since 2017. We're seeing this change continuing. So what I would like to ask for is to not just have one point of connection, but several points of connection. The McDonald Cartier Bridge should be used to connect to Lee Station. The Prince of Wales Bridge should be used also to connect Portage and Terrasse de la Chaudière to the downtown core in Ottawa, and that people from Gatineau be able to get to the airport quickly, or also to areas in the west of Ottawa. And the details of the tramway option will have to be discussed in more detail. So I would like to call for the creation of a governance table on this. Thank you.
Oui, ben, je comprends que ce n'était pas nécessairement des questions, mais j'ai quand même des éléments de réponse que je trouve important de partager pour l'ensemble des membres du Conseil d'Ottawa qui sont sur la ligne avec nous ce matin. Donc, oui, du côté politique, vous attendez à une intégration, puis pour vous l'entendre de 2017, c'est juste une option, mais ce n'est pas pour nous non plus. Il ne faut pas se tromper là, sur la slide qui est présentée avec le highlights of options. C'est vraiment en lien avec le fait que même s'il y a un tram qui traverse, il va toujours y avoir des besoins pour des autobus.
Tramway crossing the bridge, we will still need buses on both sides of the river. Even if you're moving to a system focused on the LRT, the same thing would happen on the Gatineau side. Even if the tram will reduce significantly the number of buses, we saw that on the slide that we showed you, 25 trams compared to 170 buses per hour currently. So that would really require a decrease in the number of buses. The 2017 agreement has to be looked at in its context. Now, the integration, of course, has to be based around the LRT. There's been follow-up and studies done by our teams on that. We want to make sure that we have an optimal service for people on both sides of the river as well. In terms of the governance table, well, there is an executive committee governing this study, which is co-chaired by the Deputy Minister of Transportation from the Quebec government and the Mayor of Gatineau. And the mayors of Gatineau and Ottawa also sit on this committee. There's also a federal representative on it also. Someone from PSPC, the government department, now in terms of decentralization of some employment centers. This is happening. There are forecasts that have been done on this, but the downtown cores of both cities will be a major destination, despite the fact that some centers of employment are being saying there's a diversified outside the city.
Donc, on cherche à avoir des correspondances qui soient
There
efficaces
have
entre
to
les systèmes
be
de
links
transport
which
en
were
commun.
effective
Et par ailleurs, le
between
gouvernement
our two
fédéral
systems,
cible des
and
liens
the federal
structurants de
government
transport pour y établir
is really
aussi des futurs
focusing
pôles
on the
d'emploi. Donc,
development
même s'il y
of
a du
public
mouvement, il
transit
va toujours y
to
avoir un
develop
besoin puis une
new
pertinence
centers
pour
of
ce
employment. So
système-là.
that's important
Je
as
prends bonne
well.
note de votre souhait qu'il y ait
I've
plusieurs points de
taken note
connexion. Comme je le mentionnais à votre
your
collègue,
desire to see
l'AISO investit en
several
amélioration de
connection
services à
points.
chaque année. Dans les
We
dernières
have
années,
tried
c'était 4
to
millions par
improve
année.
our
Et c'est
service
certain
over
que
the
toutes les
past few years.
améliorations qu'on
We've
peut faire
invested
pour
4
améliorer
million
ces points de
per year.
correspondance
We'll be
avec
doing
votre réseau,
everything
on
we
les
can
regarde
to
et on le fait à la
increase
hauteur
and
des
to
moyens
improve
qu'on
the
a.
points of connection between our two
Et
cities.
effectivement, vous avez parlé du
That's
pont
part of an
McDonald,
ongoing study in terms
de
of
bien
the
desservir les
McDonald
terrasses, chaudières, puis
and properly
portage.
serving
C'est aussi en
portage
ce
and
sens-là que les analyses techniques nous ont dirigés vers le pont du portage plutôt
This is
que
why
Prince de
we have
Galles dans
actually
le cadre de
opted
ce
or
projet-ci
recommended the
spécifiquement.
use
C'est important de le
of
dire. Il va y avoir toujours
the
plusieurs besoins
portage
rencontrés, mais
bridge.
là, on
There will
regarde
be
à
several
répondre à
needs
la
that we'll have
demande
to
dans
look at,
l'ouest de
but
la
what we're
ville
looking at is
pour
to
desservir le
deal with
centre-ville
demand
de
in the west
Gatineau
of
et
city
d'Ottawa.
and serving the downtown cores of both cities on both banks
C'était
of
une
the
des
river.
conclusions de faire traverser les gens
And,
à Prince de Galles
and bringing
pour
people
continuer
across the
vers
river at
Ottawa ou
Prince
ensuite
of
revenir vers
Wales,
Gatineau. C'était des détours autant pour nos usagers
actually
que pour
into
ceux
Ottawa or
qui
into
d'Ottawa
Gatineau
veulent se
would
rendre le
be a
plus rapidement
huge
possible à Terrasse dans le lien le plus court.
detour, and it
Donc,
wouldn't be
merci
anywhere
beaucoup pour vos
near
commentaires, Monsieur
Terrasse la
Fleury.
Chaudière. Thank you very much, Mr. Fleury.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. As we go through the list, again, trying to keep brief questions and brief answers. Councillor King, if it's okay, Councillor Brockington has a commitment at 10 o'clock. He has a single question he wants to jam in quick. And I got the thumbs up, so go for it, Riley.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Chair Tierney, for this opportunity. Very good. I appreciate this information. And to our presenters from our friends across the river, thank you for your time. My question is this. Your numbers indicate a doubling of the number of Gatineau residents coming into Ottawa over the next, I guess, 10 to 15 years. What is driving that? Where are these people going? Question number one. And question number two is, what percentage of Gatineau residents who come into Ottawa are not going downtown or Tunney's Pasture? How many are actually going further into the city for employment or school?
Yes, thanks for your question, Councillor. I'll have my technical expert respond to that.
Thank you.
Yes, the number of people crossing the increase there, we're seeing the most important growth in the west end of Gatineau, so the Elmer sector and the plateau as well. If you're familiar, when I showed the map, the kind of the north branch, this is where we'll have booming development. So people mainly coming from that part of the city, but also coming from Gatineau and all. This is what will be driving it. We're facing a major demographic growth over the years. So that's one, that's where it's coming from mainly. In terms of how many people will have their final destination in Ottawa and how many need to carry, we look at our fare card system, and based on the data we have there, about 80%, their final destination is there in the core, and then only 20% have to make a connection to go somewhere else.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the brief question. All right, on to Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair Tierney, and I'd really like to express appreciation to our colleagues and staff across the river and in Gatineau for providing this opportunity for a technical briefing. My question is brief, but I do want to echo the concerns of my other colleagues here in Ottawa, Councillors Fleury, Councillors Kavanagh, and I think Councillor Brockington, who are really talking about commuter mobility and having that data and ensuring that that data is integrated, not just for this project, but also taking into account the different modalities of transport, buses on both sides of the river, and the O-train operations as well, ensuring that we are examining all the interconnections for east-west connectivity that really will focus on other employment centers. But this point that I wanted to ask really involves a public consultation. What will the public consultation process look like? Because obviously you're dealing with your residents in Gatineau, but how will residents in Ottawa be able to be involved in the public consultation process?
So the public consultation we're looking at is something that have to be held online, given the context that we're living right now with the COVID-19. And so residents will be able to send questions and comments. There's a link to an email address that will be put out for that to happen. And all of those comments will be transmitted to the team responsible for this analysis and will be included in the considerations going forward with the recommendation that will be put to the Transport Committee and Council eventually. I don't know if there are more details to speak to.
Yeah, in terms of, we're working with the city staff in terms of the consultation, obviously everything. So we're planning for something in June, everything that will be bilingual, and we're also working on material to make it easily accessible and digestible as well in terms of explaining the various components of what we're looking into. So that will take place in a few weeks from now, sir.
And I just wanted to ensure that obviously there is going to be invited participation from residents of the City of Ottawa, because obviously it's such a massive impact on our downtown core.
Yes, absolutely. In the case, what I was mentioning is targeted towards specifically the people, the residents of Ottawa, and that's why we're working closely with the city staff in Ottawa.
Very good, very good. Great. Thank you, Councillor King. I see Councillor McKenney is doing double duty here. She's working extra hard today. So we'll come back to her a little further down the list. Councillor Brockington's already spoken. Councillor Menard. Is Councillor Menard on the line? I don't see him here. Councillor Cloutier. Councillor Deruze.
Hello, Tim Jean here.
Sorry, JC, I couldn't see your face there. Go right ahead.
No problem. Non, merci beaucoup. J'ai pas de questions. Je voulais vous remercier pour la présentation.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation.
Et puis vous remercier pour la présentation, mais j'ai pas de questions.
But I have no questions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Jean. I do see Catherine there. Catherine, are you available now? Great. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Tim, for accommodating that. I'm on 2 different Zoom meetings, so trying to pay attention to both. So there's a possibility that I may, in fact, repeat some of what was already said, but I'll try to be brief so that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously the decision not to use Prince of Wales is disappointing. It's something that I still struggle with, obviously, the fact that obviously on our side that we didn't build a station with the capacity to bring people from across the river into our downtown is exceptionally disappointing, but that's something that we're going to have to continue that discussion on in terms of capacity at all of our stations. But I just wonder and I'm not sure if Riley had touched on this, but, and this is more a question to our staff really, in terms of buses along Albert and Slater. Is the plan still just to, integrate with traffic, or are we back to looking at, or considering in any way, segregated bus lanes?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the specific of your question. Are you referring to a particular slide that we had in terms of the routes that the buses that would still have to go downtown would have to take?
Yeah, I just want to confirm that the plan remains the same, that the buses will use normal traffic lanes, that you don't expect that there will be a separate transit lane on Albert and Slater.
Okay, my technical expert can respond to that.
Yes, in terms of the engagement we have with the city staff and the plans is to have the buses in mixed traffic.
Okay, so that continues to be the same. And do you in your new plans, do you see an increase, or will we see it stable, or a decrease in buses on Albert Slater?
Well, obviously the idea to bring a tram would definitely have an impact on, not increasing the amount of buses. I mean, if we keep the same pace with the bus system, like I was mentioning earlier, that would mean 170 buses per hour at peak hours instead of 25 trams. Would there still be buses going downtown? Yes, there would be. Just as you have in Ottawa, your buses support the rail system. That is sort of the logic on our side as well. But we're working to make sure that it's as limited as possible to alleviate traffic, obviously, yes.
Okay, thank you. And just on consultations, what's the plan for ongoing consultations here on the Ottawa side?
Well, the plan is to have an online consultation in the course of June. Targeted specifically at Ottawa residents. Obviously would still be communicated and open to Gatineau residents as well, given that their point of destination is the downtown too. So obviously they probably have some opinions too on the options that are being looked at, but we're really targeting residents in Ottawa. We're working with your city staff to lay out the groundwork in terms of how that's going to plan out.
Okay, yeah, I did see that in the briefing, but I just wonder, like, will you be coming at some point to a committee meeting? Like, will this be a formal process in terms of our legislative agenda?
Hello, it's Vivi Chi here. Councillor, yes, when the project has formulated a recommended plan, it will come to Transportation Committee and Council for approval.
So nothing in advance of what will be the final plan? Like, there won't be an opportunity for that discussion in a more formal way?
That has not, sorry, there would be the public consultation that our colleagues in STO is planning to do, and then we will work out the details of that, how we do it online, how we engage. Those things still need to be worked on. Right now, the focus is doing the technical analysis, but we will work with them to make sure that our public get the proper opportunity to digest the information and provide comment before recommendations are prepared.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, but I guess my concern is that we seem to be just waiting for a final recommendation, and I think that we as a city and city staff have some we have to reach out ourselves to residents that we're responsible for to ensure. So I think that my concern is that we're, and no offense to the other side, this is great. We want light rail, we want transit into our city, but we on our side have requirements certainly to do our own consultation. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing that that's being advocated a wee bit. So I'd like to get some response to that, and if I have to bring it up in a different forum, I'd be happy to do that, of course. But we do have a responsibility to do our own consultation. I would think these are our roadways. It will impact how people get around on this side of the river. It will impact green space. It will impact a lot of things. So I think that there is a requirement for our staff to do our own consultation, even if it's in conjunction with STO. But at some point, I think that we have to make sure that we are doing our own analysis on what is the best recommendation here. And I'm not hearing that.
Oh, well, Councillor.
Councillor, it's John Manconi. I can assure you that you are correct. We have made that clear to STO and the chair. Both chairs, Chair Tierney and Chair Hubley, the mayor's office, are in lockstep with what your comments are. And we made that clear with STO. This is the first time our residents are seeing this, and some councillors. And we all want the same goal: integration, good environmental solutions, intermobility, and so forth. But the impacts on the Ottawa side, you are accountable as the municipal government, and we need to make sure that we have all the issues covered. And Vivi, Pat, and Phil and their team have been very diligent on the technical side, And Mark Rousseau, who's the general manager of STO, he's my counterpart. He heard me yesterday on a call that we definitely need to engage our community and have some of that discussion, because when there are issues, and there always are issues, it will be borne by your offices. So I can assure you that we've articulated the same comments. How we undertake that consultation, we will be in lockstep with STO. The mayors are very supportive on both sides of the river of this project, as are the chairs and as our staff. So we're all congruent on what we want. And I just want you to know that we support your comment in terms of ensuring that there's engagement on our side. And it will be a challenge. We're in difficult times, and STO is pressed for time. But well begun is half done, as we all say. So we will do what is needed there. I can assure you.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
If I can just add on to that, I mean, I'm myself an elected official, so obviously I'm extremely sensitive to the points that you're making, Mrs. McKinney, especially knowing that this impacts your ward more than many others. And I just want to make sure that, it's said that we, the STO, are in lock with the Ottawa City staff in terms of how to do this consultation. So we're really on est à l'écoute. We're in listening mode to what process they direct us in putting forward, and we'll comply with what is being asked. And so far, that's how things have been unraveling on this front.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, but I'm just going to reiterate one last time here that I am the
one last time. All right.
Yeah,
Go
I am the ward councillor, and
Absolutely.
I heard about this for the first time just a few days ago. So,
yep.
This will impact the ward that I represent. It impacts other wards too. I don't want to give any impression that I don't know that it doesn't impact the entire system, of course, east and west.
Right.
We have a transportation committee that I'm not part of actually, but and has carriage over this. But again, it is the ward that I represent that will feel the greatest impact, certainly initially. So I just want to make sure that. Sorry, Tim, I'll just finish and then go on. I just want to make sure that we're kept up to date, and this is more to our staff. We're kept, counselors who are mostly impacted are kept up to date step by step on what is happening, what the decision points are, and how those are being made with the public in mind. It is our responsibility to ensure that happens. So.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. And that's exactly why when we were originally meeting with the chairs and vice chairs, I felt it very important that yourself and Matthew as well both had that pre-briefing, because I share many of the concerns you have as well. And I don't want people also to think that they're going to start building tomorrow. That's why I include it in my opening speech. But there is concern over the consultation aspect for sure. Thank you for that. But I did want to go to John Manconi because for a second, there seems to be a lot of questions around Bayview Station and specifically on capacity. I'd like to hear from you, and sorry to put you on the spot, John, but it is a question and I'd like to get a response from you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a great project for both communities, for both the short term and the long term. And I just want to clarify some things because there seems to be a bit of confusion on a couple of fronts. On the integration with Lions Station for the buses, I can assure you that we have a written deal between the two mayors, and that will be occurring. Ottawa had to delay that because of some of the issues with our service. But Pat is dealing with Pat Leclerc, and we are telling them that we are anticipating our LRT will stabilize. So those buses, Councillor Flitty, I know that has been a big issue for you, and I respect that. That will be occurring in the short term. We will be integrating at Lions. So Councillor McKinney, Councillor Flitty, that impacts you the most. We will connect up with you when we have a firm date on that. I don't want anybody to think that that is somehow off the table. It is part of this long-term solution. Secondly, on Bayview, I'm hearing some comments that I just want to address straight up, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat, because the Prince of Wales connection, we all respect what that potential vision could be or could not be and so forth. This is not about a station being ill-designed or not able to accept STO's program and so forth. And STO and their team and their consultants have done a phenomenal job at looking at all connection points, and we were in lockstep with them. This is about train capacity. And as all of you have said, or many of you have said, is our travel patterns in our community are dispersing. And you have to remember that when our LRT system was designed, it's going on to almost 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And things are changing. The DND comment that Councillor Kavanagh has brought up, we're working with STO and they're responding about what buses should go to further west rather than bringing them into the core. The connection up with Lion Station and so forth. The issue on Bayview, the Prince of Wales Bridge connection is, do you really want to invest a lot of capacity and not be able to do future LRT systems in Ottawa and bus systems for a very short segment of a connection from those passengers in Outaouais, which a couple of things, yes, some of them are going downtown, but as some of you have said, are going to other parts of the community, further west and further south. So I want Pat, if I could, Chair, just to quickly summarize the issue of the Prince of Wales. None of it is because somebody does not want to connect there, both on the Quebec side or on the Ontario side. This is about integrating at the right connection points and building a system for the future also. So Pat, could you summarize the issues of the Prince of Wales, why it cannot connect for this portion, but as our partners at STO have said, it can be used for future uses, future electrification of buses connections, multi-use pathways, and so forth. Pat?
Yep, thank you, John. So I can give a few comments about this in a number of categories. These are all focused on, these are mostly focused on the effects on City of Ottawa residents and City of Ottawa transit operations. The most obvious is that today, with the service that we're running, we have not built capacity. We haven't bought enough trains to provide capacity to move people from Bayview into downtown, that short distance on the Confederation line. We can, if all of the people who are now traveling on STO were to be brought into Ottawa over the Prince of Wales Bridge and were to transfer at Bayview Station, we would need to buy more trains, add more service. And that would be a cost of several tens of millions, possibly in the hundreds of millions of dollars, just for the City of Ottawa to buy enough train capacity to move the people that short distance from Bayview Station into downtown. The reason that we've got the bus connection plan for Lion Station, the reason that the STO's current plan will work for the City of Ottawa on the financial side is that it introduces it carries people beyond the busiest point on O Train Line 1. The busiest point on that line coming from the west is between Bayview and Lion. People are getting on the trains up until Bayview. People start to get off the trains from Pimicee and Lion on into downtown. And the same is true on the other side if we were talking about anything in the Herdman to University of Ottawa range. In the future, if we look to, you'll recall that the design for O Train Line 1 is not for today's operation, it's for many, many decades to come. And even though we're carrying about, well, if we go back to pre-March, we're carrying in the range of 9,000 people per hour per direction. We've got a service once it's fully delivered by RTG, which can carry us in the 10 or 11,000 people per hour range. But the system is built, stations are built, the tracks are built, and the control system is built to accommodate much more frequent service to carry up to 24,000 people, which we will not need for decades to come. But that's 24,000 a capacity, sort of the size of the pipe through which we can move the people, move the flow of people into downtown and out of downtown in the afternoon. That's 24,000 people to be moved from all parts of Ottawa. If we introduce into it the people who are traveling from STO, and as you heard from the STO and the Ville de Gatineau, that's up to 7,000 people an hour. If they were all brought into Bayview Station and moved to the Confederation line, that would take up almost, I think it's 29% of the total capacity of our line. That would mean that there is growth in the future. This is decades out. But there would be growth in the future in Nepean, Barrhaven, Stittsville, Canada, which could not be accommodated. And it would then be time for the City of Ottawa to build another east-west corridor to move everybody into downtown. If the STO proposal here were to go ahead, those people are brought directly into downtown Ottawa, and they are not putting that pressure onto the Confederation line, and except if they're transferring to go in different directions. Councillor Kavanaugh's example of someone who's coming into downtown, connecting at Lion Station, going west to DND or Canada North. The other example of someone who's coming in, transferring at Lion or at Parliament Station, and going to the Via Station or going to La Cité Collégiale. So that's some of the information about capacity. The next category is about customers. You've heard Madame Nadeau and Patrick talk about the connections and the need to carry the people from the west part of Gatineau to their busiest destinations, which are downtown Hull and downtown Ottawa. But also for the City of Ottawa, we need there to be a good connection from our transit system to work destinations in Gatineau. And a bridge crossing the a service crossing the Portage Bridge and then turning left to go near Les Terrasses de la Chaudière does that for our customers, whether they're traveling from the east, the west, or the south, or just walking in from downtown. A connection, if we were to build a line from Aylmer or Le Plateau into Bayview Station, that would not do anything to help Ottawa residents who are traveling to work in Gatineau, and there's thousands of Ottawa residents who travel to work in Gatineau every day. They would still be needing to do what they do now, and we would still need to run buses across the Chaudière Bridge and across the Portage Bridge, like we do now, to carry those people. So that would not advance the city's interest in reducing the number of buses in downtown as much as the current proposal, the one you're hearing about today. There's a basic transit economic issue about trying to use your assets and your resources to do the most, provide the most transportation, use them as much as we can to get as much travel as we can out of our resources. If we were to put trains onto the Confederation line just to move people from Bayview into downtown, that's a trip of about 4 to 6 minutes. We have to run those trains all the way from the west end of Ottawa, all the way to the east end of Ottawa. With the tracks we're building right now for stage 2, those trains would have to run from, there's extra trains that are put on just to carry the people from Bayview, all the way from Lincoln Fields to Blair. So that would be a trip of about, I'm going to guess about 40 minutes. Maybe it's 45. It's something. It's a long time. Moving that train down, moving it back, just to give enough capacity to move people that short distance from Bayview to Lion, because at Lion there is space already. And to go back to the earlier points about the Prince of Wales Bridge, it does remain a very good potential for a future connection. It remains a very valuable secondary connection. It doesn't, for all the reasons that I'm talking about now and that the STO has talked about earlier, it doesn't meet the needs of the current study or for the current project. It doesn't provide that connection into downtown Hull or downtown Ottawa, but there's some very valuable connections that will be possible in future if any transit facility, whether it's an extension of something on the Rapid Bus corridor, whether it's an extension of something on O Train Line 2, the Trillium line, that will allow people from all parts of Gatineau to get to Carleton University more easily, to get to federal workplaces around Confederation Heights, to get to the new hospital at Carling Station, to get to the airport, and to make a connection to O Train Line 1 to go west if they're going to DND or to Canada North. So as a secondary line, the Prince of Wales connection into Bayview has a lot of potential. But my suggestion is that when you're designing any network or any service, you would design and construct the busiest, the most important part first, and a direct connection into from the west of Gatineau into downtown Hull and downtown Ottawa does that.
Great. Thank you for that brief response. On that, I know there'll be a million more of those technical questions between now and the time we get this to Transportation Committee. As we have more questions coming up, we'll make sure that we get responses to our council colleagues. I have Councillor Hubley and then Councillor Luloff. I caught him off guard at first. I'm going to call it out. He actually goes, "Oh, I did have a question." So you'll go at the bottom of the deck, okay, Matt? Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Chair Tierney. I just have a couple of questions. And one of the things that Councillor Tierney and I have discussed about this one is, where's the funding for this coming from? Like, do you have a solid commitment from the federal government to fund this project now?
The project has already been submitted as part of phase 2 of the infrastructure fund for public transit projects. So we're in discussion with our federal counterparts, and we've already had this project is on the Premier of Quebec's shortlist. It's one of the 5 projects that he's putting out as in terms of electrifying transport and prioritizing transit, and we've had a commitment to the same level as been made by the provincial government to other rail projects, which is of 60% of the funding. So that's on the Quebec side, and we're working with the federal counterparts for the remaining to have this project funded at 100%.
Thank you, because like on behalf of all the residents of Canada and Barrhaven in Ottawa, there's going to be a concern here about how this is all going to queue up. Phase 3 of our LRT project was to bring those large communities into and connect them with the current system. If we have this project going on, we're going to need to find out from our federal counterparts what's the impact on our phase 3 stuff. The other question I have for you on this is, this is a lot of construction on the Ottawa side, and I'm just wondering how that's going to work. Like, who's going to do that work? Who maintains the trains when it's in Ottawa? Because clearly we have different rules between the provinces on how things work. So I'm just curious as to where you see that going.
Yes, those are extremely pertinent questions, and we're asking them ourselves, and we're digging into them. We're drilling into sorting all of that out. Like I said, it's a complex project. It's a first, having a project like this one being put out in terms of the fact that it's in 2 cities, in 2 different provinces, and so on. But we'll have these questions as we move along answered. But we are definitely looking into them.
So along when the consultation takes place or afterwards?
It will be further out in the study, but we are working on those as part of the process right now.
Okay, and then just one last comment, Chair Tierney, is when we unveiled our LRT, part of the big selling point for a lot of taxpayers was that it was going to get buses and cars off of the road downtown in Councillor McKinney's ward. Now here we are with a second train project, independent train project, going through the core, and we're still going to have buses on those streets. I'm wondering more from our own folks, can we not have any influence here or do anything to try to get those buses off the street if we're putting trains on there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. I'm not sure who would like to answer that one. I assume, is John still there?
Yes, to the both chairs. Hence my point about referencing Lyon Street connection, Chair Hubley. That is a deal between the 2 parties, and again, we want that to happen very soon, as soon as our train system stabilizes. That will get a lot of STO buses out of the core because they will loop in that area and go back to the Quebec side. And then with this LRT that they're putting in, there'll be even further reductions. So it's significant in scope and scale and numbers. We need to implement that line connection, and there will be a very noticeable difference in the downtown core. The only remaining buses that will continue are some STO buses that will stream through to connect to Rideau and University of Ottawa, which would be too much of a walk if you were to get off at Lion Street. And that was based on some very good planning between the two parties, and obviously some of our OC Transpo local routes and the night routes. So a very significant reduction at key points.
Great. Thank you for that, John. Councillor Luloff.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Pouvez-vous parler de la
Very much.
capacité de
Could you
ce
talk
projet
about
à augmenter
the
la
ability
fréquence
of
des
this
autobus
project
du côté
to
d'Ottawa à
increase the
votre
number
côté?
of
Je
buses on
représente une
both sides of the
communauté
river?
bilingue dans l'Est
I
avec
represent a bilingual community in the East
fonctionnaires qui traversent
with many
la rivière
public
pour
servants
travailler à
crisscrossing
Gatineau.
the
En ce
river
moment,
on a
ils
daily
doivent prendre
basis.
au moins 2 bus
They
et le
have to
train.
take at
Et
least 2
j'aimerais
buses
que
and the
ce
train
trajet
at this
devienne
current
aussi
juncture,
efficace
and
que
I'd like
possible car le point
this to
d'étranglement
be
est
made
souvent
more
ce transfert.
efficient to actually
Many
deal
choose to
with
walk
the
to
strangle
places like
points.
Place du Portage,
Il y a
but
beaucoup
as
de
we know,
gens
that's not
qui
always the best
se rendent au
options with
travail à
the
pied,
winters
mais
that
on
we
sait
share.
que ce n'est pas toujours possible en hiver quand il fait très froid. Merci.
Merci pour votre question, Monsieur Luloff.
Well,
Donc, si
thanks
je comprends bien votre question,
very
ça
much for
serait
your
quoi la
question. If I
fréquence
understand
du
your
tram?
question correctly,
Est-ce
what
que
would
ça
be
va
the
être plus
frequency
fréquent
of
que
the
les autobus
tramway?
qu'on a en ce
Would it be
moment?
more frequent service than what we currently have with buses? That's the question you're
Oui,
asking? Yes,
effectivement,
it is.
en termes de fréquence,
Well, in terms
selon
of
où on est en
frequency,
pointe ou hors pointe, on parle d'une
it
fréquence
really depends on
aux
whether
3
you're
minutes
talking about
à l'ultime, évidemment. Là, donc,
the
c'est un
rush
peu comme
hour or
le
not.
SLR, on a une fréquence moindre au début, là,
We
mais
have
effectivement, ça va
a
augmenter
frequency
la
of about
fréquence.
we have a frequency
Fantastic,
that
merci
we intend
beaucoup.
to
Et j'ai
increase.
une deuxième
Thank you
question.
very much. My
What
second
is
question
the
now.
total cost of this project, and do we have any indication from our federal partners that they're willing to help fund it?
It's too early for us to put out a cost at this point of the project. That is something that will be refined throughout the ongoing study and will be put out as at the end of the study. But I cannot speculate on the estimates at this point for the projects that we're looking at right now. But as for the federal counterparts, as I mentioned, we've already submitted our request for funding as part of the Federal Infrastructure Fund, the Phase 2. And we're working with our counterparts. There's already been engagement said in terms of, this project has been well received by our federal counterparts, but it's a matter of concluding on the financing of it.
Merci encore.
Well, great. I want to thank all my council colleagues and everyone that's participated. This is a very well-run technical briefing. There certainly will be a lot more questions going forward. So again, I want to thank our Gatineau colleagues as well. I actually had a suggestion from Riley Brockington. It'd be great to have some of our members of Transportation Committee kind of go visit your facility post-COVID and check your facilities out. So if you're amenable to that, we certainly would love to do that. And we look forward to the rest of the analysis. So that concludes today's technical briefing. I know media are chomping at the bit to get questions in, so let's not hold them up. We're going to adjourn for 15 minutes, and at that point, Ian Miller will moderate media availability. Un grand merci. Have a good day.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Et bonne journée.
follow-up. So this is just for media. And also on the Zoom screen, you can choose the interpretation icon to select the audio feed in your preferred language. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions des médias pourront poser une question
the media
et une
to
question
ask
de
their
suivi.
question, one
Vous
question
pouvez
and one
choisir
follow-up
l'icône
question.
d'interprétation
You
pour
can
sélectionner
find
le
the interpretation
signal
icon to
audio dans
choose
votre
the
langue
language of
préférée.
your choice.
And again, I remind you to remain on mute
Et je
until
vous
I invite you
rappelle
to ask
de
your question.
rester
So
en
we'll now start
sourdine
with
jusqu'à ce que
1310 News.
Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure you hear me okay.
Yes, we do.
Much of the discussion around ridership doubling in 15 years or growing was done pre-COVID. So has the pandemic changed those calculations? We hear many people who've made the work from home, that transition has been quite seamless. So many employers may decide to keep that going. How does that affect you in the future?
It is, hi, this is Myriam Nadeau, head of the board speaking. It's too early to assess that type of situation with the current project that's under review right now. But obviously we'll keep, we'll follow the situation, but it's what's happening right now hasn't put in jeopardy the necessity for this project.
Perfect. And just to follow up, you've mentioned that a lot of your growth in Gatineau is in the western end, so Aylmer Plateau. Would it just not be easier to make a connection, let's say, over the Champlain Bridge or near Prince of Wales, since it gives you kind of an option as a passenger to, get to Tunney's Pasture, and then you can go east into downtown or west into Canada. So it kind of gives passengers a lot more options where many people and companies are working. Why does that not make more sense?
The major points of destination for our riders is the Gatineau and the Ottawa downtowns. And when we're talking a high efficiency, high frequency, structuring a public transit system like this one, we're looking to get them the fastest and the shortest way to their point of destination. In that regards, crossing at the Champlain Bridge or the Prince of Wales Bridge is too far off for those destinations. And for riders on both sides of the river, if you take, for example, someone living in the downtown Ottawa area, looking to move to Terrasse Chaudière, having to go by the Champlain Bridge and then all the way back again on the Quebec side to the city center is definitely a detour for them. So that's the reason why these, part of the reasons why these two bridges were put aside, especially for the Champlain Bridge, is because they're too offset. That being said, the STO is really aware of and sensitive to all opportunity to improve on the connecting points with the current OC Transpo system. And as part of the service investment that we've made since the O train has been in service, is we've actually increased the number of buses in the West End moving on the Champlain Bridge to get to Tunney's Pasture. So we're looking to respond as much as we can to the diversity of needs, but in terms of where the crunch of it is, where the major needs are, and the major points of destination, those two options that you've mentioned, we're not responding to that need.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, merci. Son point 4, Outaouais.
Oui, Yannick Saint-Denis du 104.7.
Saint-Denis from
Monsieur Fleury,
104.7. Monsieur Fleury,
un peu de questions là, par rapport à
Ottawa
l'entente
councillor,
qu'il y avait
was
en
asking
2017.
question about the agreement of 2017.
Et,
Could you remind
aussi,
us the content of this agreement and explain how it will be complied with? And second question, you can answer at the same time. You talk about 3,500 users that cross the bridge, du Portage Bridge, every day. Is it 3,500 for transit or 3,500 general
Saint-Denis, pardon.
Yes, thank you,
Donc
Mr.
oui, l'entente de 2017, c'est l'entente signée entre les deux villes afin de concevoir ensemble nos réseaux de transport en commun.
Regarding
Ça l'a donné aussi à la mise sur
our
une
transit
system
system
au siège
and
des
their
villes.
alignment.
Une partie de cette entente-là était
Part of the
entre autres
agreement
de revoir la desserte au centre-ville d'Ottawa,
une fois le train léger en opération pour faciliter l'affinage avec les stations du train léger. Et la volonté est toujours là et c'est toujours dans nos plans de le faire. Évidemment, il y a eu des... on comprend qu'il y a eu des retards dans la livraison du train léger. There were delays in the delivery of the train. So we're working with both teams to see when would be the best time to do what we plan to do.
Pour ce qui est de la deuxième question, les 3500 traverses ou ces 3500 passagers à l'heure aux heures de pointe du matin.
By hour at rush hour in the morning, and the projection is that this will more than double over the next 15 years to reach the 7,500 passengers a year, an hour rather.
Parfait, merci.
Thank you.
We'll go now to CBC.
Hello. Is it for CBC or is it Audio Canada?
CBC.
Okay, thanks. I don't want to take up someone's turn. I have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to limit them. I was struck by the fact there are no price estimates, even though you've asked for funding. I mean, obviously the difference between running trams on Wellington and in a Spark Street tunnel, those costs are going to be very different. Even when you go out to consultation, you know, shouldn't you have some idea of what the costs might be? So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about why there are no estimates and you know, how much you are thinking that you have any funds committed, because it doesn't sound like there are any at this point.
Hi. Well, there has been an estimate put out as part of a preliminary project set out by the Mayor of Gatineau back in June 2018. And that preliminary project and its preliminary routes were estimated to 2.1 billion. And it is based on that we've obtained so far the engagement of the provincial government of up to 60% of the rail project that we're working on right now. As part of
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that 2.1 billion, was that for the tunnel option or which option was it for? I apologize, I don't know the 2018 estimates.
Yeah, so the 2018 preliminary project and preliminary routes were actually put by the mayor out in the public space, and that was a vision to have the train cross at the Portage Bridge and the Prince of Wales Bridge. So it's no longer in the specifics the same project that we're talking right now, but it's still the same scale in terms of kilometers and, you know, trying to service our West End riders to both downtowns and trying to link it with the O train in Ottawa. So that 2.1 billion, you know, we knew that it would need to integrate in Ottawa. But as part of the study that's been conducted right now and the options that are being analyzed right now, those are which we do not have the estimates. So far. Right now, we're at phase 3 of the study, which is the comparison of the different options. And when we'll move to phase 4 of the current study, that's where we'll get into cost estimates.
Okay, and the other thing I was going to ask is that you had brought up that in your consultations, the Gatineau passengers have said that they would like the Gatineau system to go beyond Lion Station. And I'm not sure how that would work. So can you explain that a bit? Where would they like it to go and how would that work in a tram system, for example?
So the consultations back in June of last year were actually on the 5 scenarios that we had and we've briefly went through today. Those with the all bus, just to increase the bus system we have now, all tram, and then the 2 hybrid scenarios. And some of the questions that were put out were indeed that which mode they preferred, and if you know, once on the Ottawa side, up to where should it go. And most of them expressed a preference for it to go further than Lion. In terms of how to do that, that's part of the analysis that's being conducted right now in Ottawa with the 2 options that were presented today, one being on surface on Wellington and one being a tunnel under Sparks.
We'll go now to global news.
Hi there. Just wondering, I know we are in the preliminary stages so far, but when it comes to procurement, who would be leading that process? Is it the city of Gatineau, or would, given all the funding coming from the province and potentially the federal government, would they be playing a hand or even leading that process?
So right now it's on the Quebec side that the procurement would be done in terms of going forward and, putting shells in the ground and so on. We're looking at those questions right now, and we'll, in the course of things, be able to answer those questions more specifically, but it's too soon to tell yet.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up, as you're considering that, is there any deference given to getting the City of Ottawa specifically involved in the procurement? We've had a lot of concerns on train procurement on our side of the river, so just wondering if that's a consideration that's being made.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I get your question. Could you
is the City of Ottawa, are you considering including the City of Ottawa specifically in any procurement process to actually get the contracts out, who's going to be building this, that whole process?
Well, it goes back to the first answer I gave you. These things are being looked at. It's really soon in the process. So as we move along, those are the kind of questions we'll be drilling to get answers to. But so far, it's too soon to tell. I don't know if
maybe if I may add, it's Patrick Leclerc from the STO as well. Just everything that is done in that study is done in partnership with the City of Ottawa, OC Transpo, the NCC, PSPC as well. So obviously, anything we would be doing, even when we develop a call for a proposal, we do that jointly. Everyone has input into that. So all the steps moving forward would involve all the partners.
Okay, thank you very much.
Et maintenant, le droit.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello, everyone. Yes.
Je ne sais pas qui serait le mieux placé
I don't know
pour répondre
who's
à
in the
cette
best position
question-là.
to answer
Que
my
ce soit
question.
les gens de la STO, les gens
Perhaps
chez
the person
Transpo.
from
Mais
the person
plusieurs
from
conseillers
STO,
ont souligné
but several councillors
leur
have
déception
raised
aujourd'hui,
their
même du côté d'Ottawa,
disappointment today,
de voir
even
que
on the Ottawa side.
Le corridor du
The
pont Prince-de-Galles
disappointment
est
with the
écarté.
fact that the Prince of
Je
Wales
comprends
Bridge
les
has
enjeux
been
de
eliminated from
capacité en ce moment à la
the
station
study. I
Bayview.
understand that there's an issue with
Mais
capacity at
est-ce
Bayview.
que ça serait pas plus simple,
Don't you think
justement,
it's simpler
d'accroître la capacité,
to increase the capacity
moins coûteux, d'accroître la capacité à la station Bayview,
of Bayview?
que
It might be less costly
à creuser un tunnel
rather than having to build a
au centre-ville
tunnel
d'Ottawa, un autre tunnel.
through the downtown core of Ottawa.
Je vais offrir des premiers éléments de réponse.
Well, I'll
and
start
after that,
off
I'll let
answering.
folks in Ottawa answer.
Et ensuite, je vais permettre aux gens d'Ottawa de complimenter.
On a surtout aussi entendu des conseillers d'Ottawa nous remercier,
the
nous dire à
Ottawa
quel point
councillors
c'est
have
important
thanked
qu'on regarde
us, and they
ce
said
type de
how important
projet-là.
it is to actually undertake this project.
Des options d'un
In
coût d'un tunnel
terms
versus
of the
autre,
cost of a tunnel
comme mentionné, cette
versus
analyse-là est en cours. Donc,
another scenario, we're doing that analysis currently.
À l'étape des estimés et de la recommandation quand on y arrivera. Là, en ce moment, on n'y est pas. On est
We're
encore
not
à
yet
l'étape
at
des
the
analyses des deux
estimation
options,
of
puis on va
costs
aller en consultation aussi auprès de
stage
la
yet, so we have to
population
consult ordinary people
donc,
before
pour
we
ce
even
qui
get
est
to that stage.
du pont Prince-de-Galles puis de la
In terms
station
of the
Bayview,
Prince of
pourquoi
Wales
ce
Bridge
choix-là
and the
n'est pas
Bayview
celui
station,
qui
why we
répond
didn't opt for that
aux besoins de ce projet
opportunity.
spécifique.
It doesn't
Je pourrais
meet the
laisser
needs of
nos
this specific
partenaires à la ville
project.
d'Ottawa
That's the
répondre.
reason. I'd like to ask our partners from Ottawa to further this answer. I'll answer in English.
Good morning. The question for the City of Ottawa is on Confederation Line 1 is not about Bayview Station. The station is configured for its current uses. It is being reconfigured with the Stage 2 project for its upcoming uses and could be reconfigured for any future use. The question for the City of Ottawa is are really two. What is the best use of the capacity that we have built between Bayview Station and downtown on the Confederation Line? Is it better for that capacity to be preserved to accommodate future growth in Nepean, Barrhaven, Canada, and Stittsville? Or is it better for that capacity to be devoted to people traveling from Gatineau, the short distance into downtown Ottawa? The second question for the City of Ottawa is, would a connection by a line from the west part of Gatineau to Bayview Station help transit customers traveling from Ottawa? And the fact is that it would not help as much as the proposal that the STO has made here, which would allow people to transfer from all parts of OC Transpo to go to workplaces in the Hull sector of Gatineau.
Parfait. Merci, Monsieur Scrimger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scrimger. I have another question I'd like to ask you about this project.
Je comprends que ça va être financé
I understand that it will be funded
par l'ensemble des travaux par la ville de Gatineau
by the City of Gatineau
les subventions qu'on va recevoir du
through
provincial
subsidies from the province
et fédéral.
and the federal government.
Je me demande juste d'un point de vue légal,
I'm just wondering, legally speaking,
comment ça va fonctionner de financer finalement avec des fonds de la province.
You're going to be funding this project, which will actually involve construction on the Ottawa side, but it'll be funded with money from the province of Quebec. How will this be organized? Well, look, this is a project which is designed to meet the needs for Western Gatineau residents and for passengers coming from the rest of Gatineau. And because of our geographic situation, there are two provinces, two cities involved. So both parties want this project to go forward. The federal government wants us to go forward because many of the workers you would use the system on a daily basis to go to work. One of the goals is to reduce greenhouse gases, to increase the access to employment centers as well, reduce the number of buses on our streets. It's still very early in the process, but we're working with the federal government through PSBC and the Quebec Ministry of Transportation and the City of Ottawa. It's a complex project. It's a first in Canada. We're learning as we go, and we're adapting as we go as well. But at this stage, nothing really seems to be problematic about funding coming from the province or from the federal government, the Ottawa citizen, le citizen d'Ottawa.
Final check if we have anyone on the line from Ottawa Citizen. Radio Canada. Et TVA.
Et Louis-Charles de TVA.
From TVA. Do you have an idea of the number of years it would take to complete the construction process for both scenarios? And on the Ottawa side, what would be the main difference for you? Based on the two scenarios, in terms of the construction horizon, well, there will be one option for integration. We think it'll take between 8 and 9 years between the current study and its entry into service, and that's necessary for planning and for the construction process. As I've said, we're currently looking at the study. We'll only do the estimates of the actual cost in phase 4 of the process. And once we've decided on which option will be the best.
Quel est le délai pour répondre justement à la demande, la hausse anticipée? Est-ce qu'il y a un moment où il faudrait vraiment que ce projet-là
to decide which project you're going to opt for?
Je vous dirais le plus tôt possible. On vit déjà des situations de congestion importantes.
There's already a lot of major congestion in the downtown core, and the STO has seen a huge increase in ridership. It's exceptional at the North American level. We've seen an increase in ridership, which has been very significant. We're very happy with that, but it brings with it its own challenges. This is why this is a priority project for us. It's an important project for the region, not just for Gatineau, but for the whole metropolitan area. It's important for all parties on both sides of the river. Now, within 15 years' time, we estimate that the number of riders crossing the Portage Bridge will more than double. We have more than 3,500 crossing the bridge at rush hour in the morning. We expect that to rise to 7,500 by 2031. So it's clear we need another solution other than buses to bring all these people into the downtown core in Ottawa and in Gatineau as well.
Okay, and that's it for today. Thank you very
Alors,
much.
c'est tout pour aujourd'hui.
Donc, nous disposons aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup.
Oh, hello. Oh. Hi, sorry, it's Joanne Quinello. I'm going to use Radio Canada's question, please. Is that okay? Is everybody gone?
I think people are signing off.
All right, well, forget it then. Jeez, I hate this system. All right, goodbye. Thank you. Fuck, this is a fucking can't do.